about how to link youth participation with youth policy, essentially. So a few words about myself and my background. I've worked on participation in different positions for many years, first as volunteer, then as researcher, then for a youth council, and now I'm in this frame of the EU youth programs, where Salto is located as one of the actors. And over all that time, my basic motivation why I'm working on this topic has stayed somewhat the same, because I believe that it's essential for the progress in our societies that especially young people are involved in the decisions that are made about the future. So what I believe is that we need to improve the functioning of our democracies and also bridge a bit better the existing representative democracy with elements of more direct involvement. And this is kind of this pattern I've been following in this work on participation. So not everyone of you might know Salto, maybe some of you, but just to give a short intro, short insight. We are a resource center for the topics of youth participation and media and information literacy. Salto is a structure that supports the European Commission and the national agencies in the work of implementation of EU's youth programs. So there are a few different Salto resource hubs tackling different topics or serving different regions. And we are one of them. Just established 2018, and since then it has been working and operating in Estonia. So our work, as I said, is focused on youth participation and media information literacy. One of the things that we do in the framework of this work is that we have European think tank on youth participation that was also established in 2018, and the reason why I'm now in Athens is because we are having a meeting of that think tank. And I will refer to some of the works that has been done by the think tank later in the presentation. Coming now to the topic of youth participation. The big question that has been there ever since I've worked in that field is, what is youth participation? Youth participation has become somewhat of a fashion. Many people, many decision makers, politicians like to talk about it, like to say that they are doing youth participation, or like to open initiatives on this. But what I've realized, and what many people have realized when working on this topic, is that if you have 10 people in a room who all talk about youth participation, it's somewhat very likely that you have also 10 different understandings of what it actually is in the same room. So this is part of our work to give to provide some structures into this field and of understanding what youth participation is. So because we need to have a common ground and common understanding in order to talk about the same thing and work on the same thing. So one approach that I like a lot in that is not just describing what it is, but first looking into why we need youth participation. Why should young people even participate? So we have, like, this is based on literature from one author, R. Farting, he's called, and this is kind of a little adaptation of this. So one approach towards this is to look into the reasoning and the justification of youth participation based on its rights. So young people are essentially holders of specific rights, and those rights include the right to participate in politics and decision making. And this is agreed upon in many policies, also in different levels, in international agreements in some national policies. Sometimes, especially youth policy, is regulated not at national but at sub-national level in regions or regions or local level. So at many levels, there might be different policies upholding that or taking an emphasis on that right to participate. So this alone would be maybe reason enough, but there are other reasons behind as well. One that comes up very frequently is the mechanism of empowerment that is given through youth participation. So it's essentially about giving young people a voice in society, addressing also political marginalization of that age group youth in a way, and tackling a change in power relations between older, so to say, decision makers and young people. A third view and perspective on this is it's kind of a, you could argue it's kind of a liberal view on it. It's that participation guarantees the efficiency in policy. So basically, the idea is that when letting young people participate, this can somewhat enlighten policymakers and give them very useful insights of what is really their needs, because young people themselves are best aware of their needs. So the goal is that eventually, or the idea is that eventually better policies and services can be delivered with and through youth participation. Number 4 in that list is that the development aspect. So essentially, this is about learning about the political system, about young people developing skills, and it's here more a tool for the individual. So it's basically the development of the young people, of a young person as a citizen. And last but not least, participation can be seen as an essential means of strengthening democracy. What we in Salto Participation and also with our think tank looked into when analyzing this the question of what youth participation is, we essentially came across through three central factors describing participation in like that are recurring also in literacy. So this is what we find the essence of youth participation. Number 1, participation is a process. So it's usually not a rather one-off event, but it's about sustained engagement in decision-making processes in one way or the other. The second aspect is that participation happens at multiple levels. So multiple spheres and levels. So it's very often and most frequently the individual or local level, be it in participation in family decision-making processes, in schools, etc. So on a smaller scale, and then only less frequently on regional, national, international level, but equally important. And the third thing is participation is about power, and that's also a very interesting aspect, because once you make this explicit, then some of the decision makers that initially are big fans of participation are not the same fans anymore potentially when it comes to that implication that it, in order to do it properly, it is also about sharing powers. And here you can differentiate also about about the more top-down approach, so to say, of inviting youth participations, invited forms of participation, or more bottom-up forms that are created forms of youth participation. So this is also just to give you one view, one meaningful definition on participation as such. So, if you want to dig deeper, I'm making this little advertisement here that we have in our think tank. We have made 2 publications. One is called Closer to the Edge of Participation and Activism, or especially tackling this this question of what is young youth participation. And the second one is called A Seat at the Table for Everyone, where youth participation is connected to the current developments at the EU level, the new EU youth strategy especially. And also the second aspect is the inclusiveness of youth participation. So now coming to one topic that's very close to me. It's the youth goals, and I introduce it here because I think it's a very very interesting example of a participatory structure that led to some implications, some political implications at European level. At the start of this whole process leading to the youth goals was a very simple question that that we posed and discussed across Europe. The question was, youth in Europe, what's next? So what is next? What's coming up for the following decade of youth policy at European level? And the interesting thing was from the beginning that it was clear that it's going to lead the whole process, the participatory process, going to lead into a political outcome text, the EU youth strategy. I would like to use this second opportunity now for interaction. Laimonas.
Yes, so we launch now the second question about the youth goals. What do you think about the youth goals? Meanwhile, there was one question from Sophie. I think when you mentioned what the participation is for, was this one aspect of power. Mm-hmm. She asked, is it more about the power or the leverage in a way? So kind of using the resources or using the access available and using your leverage to make an influence. Mm-hmm. No more votes coming, so I would end the poll and I will share the results.
Okay, some never heard of it. And then some distribution with a leading in improving the link between institutions and youth. That's very interesting as well for me. Mm-hmm. All right. Keeping that in mind, I will lead you quickly through some of the thoughts behind the process. So when we were at the beginning of this process, and this is a kind of only 2 years ago, if I remember correctly, it was part of the process of the structured dialogue of the 6th cycle. And in this beginning, we had this analysis that that very often when we talk in this field, in this youth field, about what we are doing, we come to a very long list of problems. It's like they are kind of a recurring problems or over the time that, for example, this analysis that the EU is falling apart. With many examples, that there is still a big gender inequality, that there are nationalistic tendencies, and so on and so on. So what we felt is that looking at this long list of problems, what does it generate? It usually generates some kind of fear, and this often leads to that people turn the back on you and rather walk away because it's just too depressing. We cannot tackle this all. So this was the beginning, and what we saw is like what it needs is that we formulate out of this recurring pattern of problems. We need to have some kind of positive twist on this and reformulate these problems, because the problem analysis is still valid and valuable, and this is a basis, but the story needs to be changed. And because when we keep tackling the same problems, they are not getting, you don't feel they are getting smaller. But to the other direction, if we have a formulated vision that we can agree upon with some goals that are there, then it's a different story. Then we can invite people to join us into this journey of increasing the situation regarding each of these goals one by one. And every step that you take, every project you make is a contribution leading to a brighter future, and not this negative narrative. So this was the main idea, the change in narrative, that we have, that we are striving towards a brighter future for the young people in Europe. And we didn't stop in this development process at just this very general goal topic, because you might feel that that everything is there, but we went one level deeper, and I have chosen one of the examples, Youth Goal number 3, inclusive societies, just to introduce to you, or to remind you that there is even in all of the youth goals 7 targets that have been outlined. So a bit more already into the direction what can be done, what's the basis for measures that can be developed, what's the basis for projects that can be implemented at all the levels. So the interesting thing is to point out that this has been it's kind of a quite big participatory project, and a complex one, because it interlinks so many levels, from very local contributions to the process to the European level, where this has been formulated in the meetings of the EU youth conferences, where we had youth representatives from all over Europe coming in and agreeing on this, together with decision makers, together with policy makers. So this is a kind of powerful basis that is there, and it has been there only since 1 year, so it's still quite new, and it's still only now being more and more made use of. And also it arrives, for example, in the field of the national agencies, where I see that many people make these links now, that that projects that have been kind of disconnected to the European level before are now told in that narrative that they are connected to our bigger vision of implementing the youth goals over the years. So the interesting aspects that I see, and that might be also worth considering in whatever your initiatives are, whatever you work on, is that aspect of focusing on these common goals rather than competing for resources in the youth field. I have the feeling that the youth field is anyways not striving with loads and loads of resources, and many times it was before this competitive approach. But with this common agreed goals, this is more a basis of increased cooperation. So what was also one really important aspect is in the beginning of this process, some I talked to decision makers from the local level in Austria who said like, okay, we are now working on a new strategy, a youth strategy. We need to make it easier to understand, and also like young people in a small community in a remote place in Austria will need to understand this. So he is, for example, very very happy with this outcome, because with this goal, the narrative is much easier to communicate. Yeah, just to point out this too. I think I had also prepared some more examples in linking youth policy with social inclusion. I'm just looking at the time, not to spend all the time talking about the youth goals. I would also like to introduce you the 3 selected examples linking youth policy with social inclusion that I selected. And one aspect when looking into work and projects is to realize, or to see what level of involvement we are talking about. I mean, many of you might be familiar with the very famous letter of participation. We have chosen here a bit of different approach, most relevant in our conception, in our way of seeing youth participation, was those 4 different things. And it's important to keep in mind that not necessarily one way of doing youth participation is much better. You just have to be clear about what it is about. Is this just about sharing information with young people? That's sometimes good enough, or is it are you consulting? Is it a cooperation, or is it a partnership on equal levels? So this is all good approaches, but you have to keep in mind that whenever you dig deeper in that sense, you need more resources, more time, more involvement to make this truly happening. Yeah, this is also an approach that has been parallel to the youth goals process happening in Austria. We talked with the open youth work centers on how to make how to access youth centers, because they reach out to different young people than many other structures or some youth organizations do. So what they did is to explore a bit what works well and what doesn't, and they have maybe simple messages, but still very important. And there is a fact sheet on 10 points that you can consider when making youth participation in decision making happen, or a reality in that surrounding of youth centers. And one thing, and this connects with what Christina, I think, posted before the meeting. Before the webinar started, there was the Spanish contribution. So she mentioned that it has to be that you need to meet the young people where they are, talk their language, have this access in an easy way. It has to be close to everyday life. It has to stay flexible, also throughout the process, but also with the result. You cannot pre-define what is coming out. So that's the messages from that example. And then there's another example which I really like. There was a project supported with funds from from Erasmus Key Action 3 pool, which was used for the very specific target group of young care leavers, young people turning 18 and who have been in care institutions, but losing from one day to the other because of their 18th birthday all their access to the care. And so they had a very specific interest in changing the law and the situation and the policies made. So there were regional workshops developed to develop policy demands together with them, and many of them had this experience that for first time in that extent they are listened to in that political way, in that depth, listened to with being heard and taken seriously. So this was kind of a really empowering fact. And also what was interesting there is like a kind of a very specific topic, but still they made use of this connection with this whole European framework. There's the European policy, also the youth goal number 3 that I introduced on social inclusion, that they made and they made their point also when talking to the policymakers in Austria, that even the European framework supports the cause in a way and backs the cause. And yeah, the last example is one of decentralizing the access. So not just looking at the national and the European level, but there are many good examples where you have young people as ambassadors working on a more direct way, for example, in schools or in any other form with their peers, to connect or to bring also European dimension into more localized and regionalized structures.